The Western recordings come as the latest news poll shows support for Mr Baillieu remains at its lowest since he won office. If an election were held, the coalition, which holds government by one seat, would lose to Labor. Hamish Fitzsimmons, Lateline.
And now back to our top story, the Prime Minister's sleepover in Rooty Hill. Our guest this evening is the Mayor of Liverpool in Western Sydney, Ned Mannoun. Like 72% of those in his local area, his parents were born overseas. He's a Lebanese-Australian Muslim Liberal who last year broke Labor's 21-year leadership of the council. It was former Liverpool Mayor and one-time federal Labor leader Mark Latham who inspired Ned Mannoun's interest in politics. Ned Mannoun, thanks very much for joining us.
Good evening and thank you for the opportunity.
Now, the Prime Minister held a meeting in Western Sydney this evening with local councillors, but I understand you didn't make it. Why not?
No, I was looking after my 6-month-old baby and the Prime Minister brought the meeting forward, so unfortunately I couldn't get there.
But you've heard what was discussed?
Yeah, the president of WesRock, which was the Western Sydney Regional Organisation of Councillors, Councillor Tony Hachidi, is a colleague of mine on Liverpool Council. So we had a discussion and obviously being a member of the board I'm aware of the issues. The number one issue that was presented to the Prime Minister and her ministers who were there was about not only building the infrastructure, you know, the roads and the trains, but bringing the jobs out to Western Sydney so people don't have to travel east all the time.
And were there any concrete suggestions made?
Look, she was there, she listened. You know, ideally what we want though is if she's governing to actually come out there and start delivering.
Did she come up with any proposals for ways to bring jobs to the western suburbs of Sydney?
From what I understand, there was nothing put out there concrete. One thing that we did suggest, though, is things like the Moorebank intermodal. Moorebank is an area along the Georges River, right on the border of Liverpool CBD. There was an MOU with the former federal government about turning that into a business park, which would have created around 15,000 jobs for the area. Unfortunately, that has been changed into a freight terminal, which would only provide at best 1,500 jobs. So there was brought to about maybe reviving that project there and providing those employment opportunities. The biggest issue, facing Western Sydney is employment. You have at the moment we're going to be having a shortfall of around 300,000 jobs in the area. We need to bring jobs to Western Sydney. That's the number one and most important issue in the area.
Now, Tony Abbott just today declared that Western Sydney is now Liberal heartland. He's counting his chickens before they're hatched, isn't he?
There's one thing about us as Australians. We believe in a fair go. The Labor Party has had a fair go in Western Sydney for a very, very long time. At a state level, they changed their vote back in 2011 in New South Wales, and they gave the Liberals a go. In the council election in September, they gave the Liberals a go as well. And there's from what I hear on the ground, there's a chance that will actually happen again. Now, in doing that, you know, if there is an Abbott government, Tony Abbott does become the Prime Minister, and if he works hard for the people of Western Sydney and delivers for them, there's no reason why people will not continue voting for him. People have memories, they've seen what Labor has done, they've given them a go, and working hard and delivering, which the Liberal Party is about, will provide, I think, a good potential future for the party in that area.
You say bringing jobs out to Western Sydney is the biggest issue, and yet we haven't heard Tony Abbott articulate that. He's talked about removing the carbon tax, stopping the boats, but yet you didn't cite those as the biggest issues facing your area.
No, look, there's a lot of pressures in Western Sydney. Cost of living pressures, when we're out there door knocking and speaking to people, a lot of people saying, you know, how the carbon tax is hurting them, putting up their electricity prices and all those different issues. There's a lot of industry that is closing down. We have a lot of manufacturing in Liverpool and in Western Sydney, and they're feeling the brunt of the carbon tax, and those jobs are being moved offshore. And those things, that's what needs to actually stop.
But the issues like the second airport, which is a topic that's been discussed for decades, and traffic gridlock, they've been issues that have been around a very long time. They're not specific to this federal Labor government, are they?
Ultimately, at the moment, the Prime Minister is the Prime Minister at the moment. She says she's not. She says she's not in an election campaign, and she's governing. Well, we want to see some governing and actually getting some results.
Now, one thing, of course, that does bind many parts of Western Sydney is this issue of multiculturalism. The fact that in Liverpool, for instance, as I mentioned earlier, 72% of people have parents born overseas, like yourself, and you were born in the United States yourself. Now, how has that, do you think, changed the politics of your region?
When people first originally migrated to Australia, they were told that, you know what, the Labor Party is a party for the migrants. And they settled out in Western Sydney and voted that way. But more and more, I think people are starting to see, hold on a second, is the Labor Party really for us? A lot of migrants believe that it's hard-working people coming here and they want to be rewarded for the work and effort that they do. They don't want to be taxed, and they're seeing more and more that their views are in line with the Liberal Party views, and I think this is the change that we're seeing in the area, just one element of it.
Now, the Federal Coalition has time and again identified asylum seekers as one of the most important issues in Western Sydney. What do the people of Liverpool say to you about that?
Liverpool is a very harmonious place. One of the best things about my job is I get to give new citizens and be the first person to congratulate them and give them their citizenship certificate. It's a wonderful event. We have over 160 nationalities living in Liverpool. We live harmoniously. We live all peacefully with each other, as I think a great example to the world. There is a process to come to this country. I followed that process, or my family did, and I think people want that process to be followed.
But how big an issue, as you speak to people, is the asylum seeker debate? And specifically, do you think it was a good idea when Scott Morrison, the Shadow Immigration Minister, said the people of Western Sydney should be notified when asylum seekers move to their areas?
Yeah, I'll give you an example of what we do in Liverpool. Only last week I was speaking to the manager of the Liverpool Migrant Resource Centre, and I asked him that when they're actually having the new migrants coming through and they're doing the inductions for them, to please invite me along, because I want to welcome the people into our city and offer our services and help and support.
That's different to notifying the locals, though, isn't it?
Well, as in notifying ourselves, we want to know. But what's important is that when people are here, they're getting the help and the service and support that they need.
But that's different to notifying your neighbour.
In the sense that, look, well, from a council's point of view, it's important that we know what's going on. We can't have people housed in commercial office buildings like happened in Parramatta. The important thing to look at is I guess, how we get everyone to live with each other peacefully like we do in Liverpool. Liverpool is a great city in that you have all these different nationalities, everyone is living peacefully, everyone is living happily, and it's a great thing, and that's the model that we need to replicate and continue going on with.
I guess the point is, why should asylum seekers be treated differently to anyone else moving into a community?
Yeah, look, at the end of the day...
Are you notified every time someone new moves into your community?
No, but this is the great thing is, look, as a good neighbour, you love thy neighbour, so you knock on the door and you say hello and get to meet them. And it's a
That's
great
different to a formal process, which also, according to Scott Morrison, should include a complaints mechanism where people can complain directly about asylum seekers and a code of behaviour specifically for asylum seekers. Do you support such measures?
Look, I'm not here to provide a commentary on what's happening with the federal government.
But he says these are specific to your area.
So, as I was saying, I'm not here to provide a commentary on that.
But I'm curious, because you're from the area that he has identified as one needing these specific measures, I'm curious to know whether you support them.
Look, not knowing the exact details of what was proposed, I think what I'm here to do is present the views of the people of Western Sydney and Liverpool.
Do the people of Western Sydney want a code of behaviour for asylum seekers?
Look, that's a new policy. We haven't asked them, but what's important is they want people to live by the rules that everyone else does and to understand it. There's a lot of things that are out there that people don't understand of how Australia is. But once again, in Liverpool, we're doing a great job of bringing everyone to live together peacefully, happily. It's a great city, and I welcome you to come along any time to come and see for yourself.
Now, of course, the Prime Minister announced an initiative to try to tackle gang crime. How big an issue is guns in the area?
Look, there's no doubt there's a lot of people out there that are concerned about what some of the issues that are happening in Western Sydney with guns. I know in Liverpool, for example, one of the things that we're doing is, and a big election promise of ours was to install CCTV cameras in Liverpool CBD. Safety is paramount. People want to make sure their kids are safe, their families are safe, and I know from a council point of view, we work with the local police very closely in doing whatever we can. And I welcome the federal government to work with us on doing anything we can to help make our area is a safer area. Ultimately, what people want to see from government is leadership. They want to be able to see the Prime Minister come along and actually say, you know what, let's work together, let's deliver some good outcomes. Unfortunately, today, if you look at the West Connects that the Prime Minister said, well, she'll now fund $1 billion to, well, she's done that, but she's attached all these conditions to it.
But some of the conditions, let's look at the conditions. I mean, I guess from her point of view, she wants to see value for money from her investment, and she's saying that the road should go through the city to give people the best benefit. There's no point going to Botany if the road isn't going to the city if you're working in town. And the other thing she's saying is that it shouldn't have a toll. Wouldn't your constituents agree that they're Fair enough measures?
My constituents would love everything for free and they want it all to happen tomorrow. The reality is, though, things cost money. But what's important to note here is that the Premier has a good plan that was a lot of research has been put into it. We don't want the Prime Minister announcing things when we're not in an election campaign and saying, well, here's some money, but here's all these conditions. We want someone who's going to show some leadership.
Do you think it should go through the city?
We want someone, look, I'm not a transport expert. What we want, though, is people want to see leadership. They want to see the Prime Minister...
On the point of leadership, if I can just pull you up on that for a moment, because we're running out of time, a recent poll has shown that much of the reason Labor is on the nose in Western Sydney is a matter of leadership, and that, in fact, if the leadership was changed to Kevin Rudd, Labor could, in fact, win Western Sydney. Why do you think Kevin Rudd is more popular in the West than Julia Gillard?
Look, I think there's obviously there was issues around that, but once again, they want to see this leadership of what's going on. And
well, you used to be a member of the Labor Party. You must have a view.
Look, I think personally, if Kevin Rudd were to become the leader, or sorry, become the Prime Minister, I think people would have a lot of questions about that. There may be a small little bounce, but what happens after that? I think people are going to remember the failed insulation scheme and what Labor ministers have been saying at the moment. But what people want is they want leadership and they want government. And the Prime Minister, she's come to Western Sydney for 5 days. It's such an important area. Why do you need to come and set up camp here? If she wants to set up a government office, more than happy to give her some office space in Liverpool and welcome here to do it on a more permanent basis.
Ned Mannoun, we've run out of time. I thank you so much for coming in and taking the time to speak to us this evening.
Thank you very much.
Victoria's largest civil case, a class action over a deadly Black Saturday bushfire, began today in a courtroom specially constructed to cope with the many